A major figurehead of the new Hollywood cinema of the 1970s joins us now. He is a screenwriter, director, and film critic of major note, whose past film credits include The Yakuza, Taxi Driver, Obsession, Hardcore, Blue Collar, American Gigolo, Raging Bull, Mishima, A Life in Four Chapters, Cat People, The Mosquito Coast, The Last Temptation of Christ, Lice Sleeper, Affliction, Bringing Out the Dead, Dying of the Light, Autofocus, The Canyons, and others too numerous to mention. And if you haven't guessed who this person is based on that overwhelmingly impressive resume, well, you can stop listening and are watching right now and leave the room, because Paul Schrader is here, and he joins us now on behalf of First Reformed, the profoundly powerful story of a religious cleric played by Ethan Hawke in Existential Crisis, I guess you would say. Is that pretty accurate, Paul?
Yes. Well, when counseling a parishioner, he speaks of the sickness unto death, which is a phrase by Kierkegaard referring to angst or despair, and he suffers from it.
Personal despair,
yeah,
brought about by personal angst. Yes. Well, this is just personal opinion here, sir, but I think this is your magnum opus. I think it's a note-perfect cinematic distillation of everything you've stood for and represented as a film artist, and all your preoccupations are here: sex, death, religion, and all the attendant attributes associated with those topics, like guilt and fear and faith and redemption, reconciliation. Is that a fair, accurate?
I think that's fair. I feel that it rounds it off. I left Calvin College 50 years ago to come to UCLA. The first book I wrote was a book of theological aesthetics on transcendental style. The first screenplay I wrote was Taxi Driver. And they're both in this movie. And so I don't know if this will be the last film I make, but if it is, it's a very good last film.
Boy, I would be happy if not that, of course, we want that to happen in any way, shape, or form, but yeah, it's a note perfect movie. There's nothing I can take issue with in this film. It's absolutely right in every department, technically and everything. Given today, so I have to ask you this: given today's movie marketplace and product, this movie is shockingly antithetical to that, and we're going to talk about that a little more here in detail forthcomingly here. So that begs the question: how, on what was once God's green earth, did you get this movie made?
Well, I got it made because the economics of the film industry have changed. I was speaking with Pavel Pawlowski, who had done Ida, and he was saying to me that if I can do a film for $2 million, the money will come back, and I can justify it.
So it was the numbers, basically.
So I made this film in 20 days. 20 years ago, it would be 40 days. It would have been, I don't believe a filmmaker has an obligation to make his backers rich, but he does have an obligation to try to get their money back. And at 20 days and this budget, I felt I was making a financially responsible film. And so that's sort of what changed. I never thought I would make a film like this. I'd written about these films, and I just would say to people, no, that's not me. I'm not a spiritual filmmaker. But now it finally came. After talking to Pavel and walking back uptown, I thought to myself, you're going to be 70 next year. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to write that movie you swore you would never write.
Oh. Could you talk about the style of this movie? Its austerity, its craft, the pacing, your use of silence. This movie is like a silent scream in a way.
Well, when you are talking about contemplative or spiritual movies, you get involved in withholding devices. Most movies are desperate for the audience's attention, and they will throw anything they can at you in terms of images and action and sexuality and music. But when you start withholding from the audience, you're saying, I'm not going to give you any music. I'm not going to give you any fancy colors. I'm not going to give you any tricky camera shots. I'm going to make everything squared off and plain metric. As you start to give them less and less, a viewer has a choice of one or two things: either to lean into you to get more, or to get up and leave the theater. Now, if you can keep them in the theater by giving them a sense that if you lean in, it will be worth it. Something is going to happen. Now you have a viewer who is putting himself or herself into the story and trying to hear clearer because you're speaking so softly. And once that happens, you have a kind of magical relationship with the viewer. And you can start to do kind of spooky things. So you can have a character that they identify with simply because you've given them no choice because there are no other characters. And all of a sudden, after about 45 minutes or an hour of identification, the character starts slowly veering off, and he's becoming somebody else. And he's becoming somebody who doesn't merit your identification. But you can't stop identifying with him because you've bought that one. And so as he veers away from your identification, you are being dragged along. That's a kind of magical thing. That's what art can do when it really works. And you can't really predict where that will land on an individual viewer because they are contributing to a degree that you can't control anymore.
Well, you're giving your audience a lot of credit. I mean, you're expecting them to do a little bit of work, which is also kind of antithetical with...
movies are essentially the most passive art form we've come up with. You don't have to do anything. You don't even
just
have
sit there.
You don't even have to stay awake. I've slept through some of the greatest movies ever made.
When you were talking about... my takeaway from something you said, it's about establishing an ethos, a mood. The opening shot, that slow trucking in shot to the First Reformed Church, I thought maybe I was going to be in store for a horror movie. It was scary. It was really scary. It's almost like, and I don't know if you were conscious of that or if you were conscious of the way you opened the movie, but that drew me in right away. And I knew a little bit about the movie from having read little bits and pieces here.
Yeah, actually, it was... inspired by the opening shot from a Mexican film called Silent Light by Carlos Regados, which I like a lot, which is a remake of Carl Dreyer's Ordette. And he starts with a very, very long dolly like that.
Again, back to the craft and the cinematic texture of this movie, which is pure. I don't know how else to describe it. And I love how it kind of jolts you via this kind of, it's almost like a dramatic sterility that keeps pulling you in and clutching at your throat, but at the same time, it's kind of pushing you away. I felt almost like you were cutting off my oxygen supply just enough to keep me alive for the film's denouement. I tell you, that's how it played.
Well, when I first met with Ethan, who is... a writer, director, musician, playwright, actor. And I said to him, Ethan, this is a lean back performance. And he understood what I meant immediately. So, most performances, the actor leans into you. They're trying to get your attention, just like they're having a first date with you. They get your eye contact. Look at me. The other way to go is to lean away. And the more interested the other person seems in you, the more you lean back. Till finally, you're controlling the power exchange by being recessive.
Yes. Yeah.
And so films of this sort try to master that tricky art of withholding. What's the difference? How can you use boredom as an aesthetic scalpel. At what point is the scalpel of boredom serving your purposes, and at what point is it simply boredom?
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, but but obviously, how do you know when you've achieved that, or do you ever really know?
That in some ways it's intuitive. It's just a sense. It comes back to something I call make a rule, break a rule. Well, the nice thing about making rules is that you get to be the first one to break them. And so I make a rule in this film: no dolly shots, no pans, no tilts. And then all of a sudden, one shot, I break the rule. And then I go back again. And I just break the rule to remind you that there is a rule. Now, how, on what day do I break it? I don't know. It's just intuitive. I remember saying to the cameraman, I said, I was watching a scene. I said, I think today we break the rule. We put in a movie shot. And I don't know why. It just feels like today's that day.
God, there's so many themes, and we're not going to have enough time to get to all this stuff. But one of the things I thought was that I particularly loved, it was kind of cathartic for me watching it, is the way you captured in this movie this sense that nobody is really doing anything specific or concrete. And this is a generalization about what's going on with the world today environmentally. I mean, did you see Chasing Coral by any chance?
I have a copy of. Well, I didn't want. I know the story. It's all so sad.
Well, it's facts and it's science, and it's like within a few years.
Yeah.
I mean, certain things are going to be irreversible.
I think we here, Homo sapiens, have made our decision. We have decided that.
I think we're at a point of no return, kind of.
Yeah, we've decided that present comfort outweighs future survival.
The collusion of religion, too, and fundamentalism to boot with American politics, and the religious rights seeming like infatuation with the sitting president. What do you think that? What is that? What?
I don't know. I mean, I've been on a seminary tour with this film, showing the film and giving a lecture at Calvin College and at Fuller Theological and at Yale Divinity. These are all mainstream humanist Protestant divinity schools. And in each one, I run into faculty who are just banging their heads against the wall saying, how could this be? How could this church that called us become this thing that is now supporting Trump? How did this happen?
Yeah. Well, Abundant Life in the movie is a mega church that's supporting the dwindling First Reformed Church. What's your opinion of mega churches?
Well, I think that for the most part they are using the techniques of mass events and rallies. I think most services in the megachurch are not that dissimilar than a sporting event where everyone stands up and makes the same gesture and cheers the same thing and sings the same song. It's about, the exhilaration of being in a crowd and the exhilaration of being part of something, but it's certainly not about the introspection of looking into oneself.
Right, nobody's going within. It's all external. It's all trappings. It's all like show. It's all display.
Yeah, and the difference between a Nuremberg rally and a University of Michigan sporting event and a Joel Osteen service is not that different.
Blue Collar, the first movie you directed 40 years ago, it depicted big business and big labor as collaborators and the precipitous decline of American unionism. 40 years ago, that movie came out almost. It's prescient. I mean, it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
And that movie painted an accurate picture of what it was like then, but it's actually gotten worse. I thought, I mean, it's prescient. I saw it recently again, and I thought this movie could have been made today.
Except no one would make it today.
Yeah, except nobody would make it. Yeah. Anyway, do you see yourself? This is pretentious, I guess, but do you see your films in any particular way? And I describe Blue Collar as prescient.
Well, you try to stay on the cusp of social change, or even in criticism. Like I wrote the first book on spirituality in film.
Transcendental style in film, which is going to be updated, right? In May, it's going to come out.
May
right?
22,
okay.
yeah, from UCal Press.
Okay.
And then I wrote the first article on film noir,
right.
So you do get a sense of that there's something in the air, And like with American Gigolo, I just got that sense that there was an American dandyism right around the corner, that American men wanted to dress up. And so occasionally you catch the wave. And obviously with Taxi Driver, I caught the wave that never ends.
Yeah, right. Yes, you did. I'm looking at the clock here. In summation here, I think this is a goddamn work of art. I really think it's, at the risk of sounding, I mean, this is going to be hyperbole, but I really do think it's one of the great films of this century. I truly do. Why should people come to see it? I mean, hopefully they'll listen to me, what I just said, but
I think we are in serious times, and I think watching a serious movie while living in serious times is a good way to spend your time.
Wow. We've been in conversation with Paul Schrader. The movie is First Reformed. This is a must-see picture. It's, as I said, I think it's arguably the first great film of the century, and there you have it. It demands to be seen, I think, several times and discussed and mulled over and analyzed and dissected and ruminated upon, like in the late 60s and in the decade of the 70s when movies were a cornerstone of the cultural conversation. When you were making them back then, would that we all, for a brief moment, return to that state. And we have an opportunity to do that with First Reformed. Paul Schrader, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, sir. Thank you. I wish we had an hour, but what can you do, right? There's restrictions all over the place. But thank you so much. Thank you.